So after Max Holloway defeated Calvin Kattar in the main event of the first card of the year in spectacular fashion, it leaves him in a little bit of a weird situation, and you wouldn't normally hear that said after a guy gets a spectacular performance and one of the best ones in his career and he's number one in the division. But he's in a little bit of a tricky spot right now because you've got guys like Magomedsharipov probably going to be fighting Yair Rodriguez next, and that could lead to some weirdness on Holloway potentially getting another title shot at 145. If Zabit wins, you kind of might have to give it to him. And then you've got Volkanovski versus Ortega as well. If Volkanovski wins, even if you disagree with the decisions, Volkanovski technically has 2 wins over Max Holloway, so that's a little bit of a weird situation as well for Max Holloway. So I thought in this video today, we'd go through all of the options on what Holloway could possibly do with his career next to make things work and what the best pathway would be to get him back towards those title fights that he needs to be in, because we need to make pay-per-view money out of Max Holloway's name because I think he's a bigger name than ever right now. I thought I'd also go through the whole featherweight division, all of the rankings, and even some guys outside the rankings as well. Matchmaking the entire featherweight division because I feel like right now we're on snooze mode. No featherweight matchups are being made really, and I think they're about to be made soon. So I'm going to go through all of the rankings, matchmake everyone, and first we'll start with Max Holloway's options on what he should do next because that's who this video is kind of revolving around right now. And speaking of the revolving around, I feel like the featherweight division kind of revolves around Max Holloway right now, and if he leaves to go up to 155, which is an option that we're going to talk about here in a second, I feel like we'd lose a lot of hype in that featherweight division. I just love the featherweight division with Max Holloway in there, and I need to see the Alexander Volkanovski trilogy because even though he's lost twice technically, I think we can all agree that he's earned himself a trilogy just with how competitive both of the fights were anyway. And also if he goes on to beat another guy in the featherweight division, he'll kind of eliminate all the other options. We're going to talk about that in this video as well. I think Holloway should stay in the featherweight division, but if he wants to go to 155, there are a ton of matchups out there that he can take right now because Dustin Poirier has earned himself a shot at a title right now at lightweight. You've got Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira calling for a title shot against Dustin Poirier because it looks like Khabib is probably not going to be coming back anytime soon, so they're probably going to make a vacant title fight, and if any of those guys don't get a title shot of Chandler or Oliveira, Holloway could just jump up there. He's coming off a win and have a great matchup against either of those, a very dangerous matchup, don't get me wrong, but he could jump himself right into the top 5 and hold weight and negotiation power in 2 different divisions and make the most of this time that he's going to be on ice in the featherweight division. He could also go up there and take on Rafael Dos Anjos and just get a free paycheck, in my opinion. I think he would very easily beat Rafael Dos Anjos at this point in RDA's career, especially after that last performance against Calvin Kattar. I think Holloway would really badly piece up RDA at this point if he could stuff those takedowns, and I would bet on him stuffing those takedowns as well. I like the idea of Holloway going up to 155, just not yet because we need him at featherweight. All of the storylines revolve around Holloway. He's the biggest name in the division right now. I'm not a big fan of a guy getting a bunch of value in a division and then jumping out to the division above. We need to see Holloway at 145, and out of his options at 145, which I think is more realistic coming up soon, let's go through them. I think Holloway could try and steal one of Zabit Magomedsharipov or Yair Rodriguez from each of them, because when you think about it, as much as Zabit and Yair probably really want to fight each other after how many times it's been rescheduled and postponed, and as much as I want to see that fight be made next, which we're going to get to with the matchmaking of the division coming up soon, I feel like if Holloway tries to steal one of them, they would accept because Holloway is number 1, and if you're going to risk a chance at a title elimination bout, you might as well do it against the number 1 guy in Holloway, rather than each other at 2 and 5, I believe Yair Rodriguez is right now, or maybe 4 in the featherweight division, but they're both good contenders. I just feel like if Holloway wants to really jump ahead and get in the way of them and take one of them away from the other guy, he could secure himself a title shot and eliminate a title contender option, especially if it's Zabit Magomedsharipov, because I'll tell you this, if Zabit beats Yair, he's won a lot of fights, and you kind of have to give him a title shot as well. And if Volkanovski beats Ortega, you've got Zabit at the top, Holloway at the top. Volkanovski's got 2 wins over Holloway. Fresh matchup with Zabit. Then you could maybe do Zabit versus Holloway if Zabit gets to jump over Volkanovski. I just feel like the UFC, if Zabit wins, is going to mess over Holloway here and give it to Zabit. And honestly, rightfully so, because he's beat everyone in the division so far that he's taken on. And I feel like he would get the title shot if he does get the win over Yair Rodriguez. So if Holloway wants to jump ahead of either of those guys, steal a matchup from one of them and eliminate an option, that's what he should do next. But I don't think he's going to do that, because if Zabit Magomedsharipov wasn't fighting Yair Rodriguez next, I truly believe he would have had a matchup made by now. They're waiting so that Yair Rodriguez suspension, which is up on the 8th of March in my memory, I feel like it's up on the 8th of March. So if we go ahead in March and go to UFC 260, I think we should do this. Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. You know, Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega is on UFC 260 in the co-main event. Let's make Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Yair Rodriguez also on the main card of UFC 260. And let's have Holloway make weight at UFC 260 at 145 pounds, championship weight, keep him in shape. He doesn't spar anyway, so it's not like he's going to have to go through a ridiculous camp of hard rounds and get all of his greatness in, because I feel like Holloway is kind of the perfect fighter to take a fight on short notice, purely because he doesn't really spar hard anymore, which is a good thing, because he's always going to be ready. He's reached that point in his career where he already knows how to fight, and he doesn't really need to perfect a training camp and get his timing down, because he already knows how to do it. I feel like he should be the short notice replacement for UFC 260 in the featherweight division for either of Volkanovski versus Ortega pulling out, or Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Yair Rodriguez. Something happens there, he can slide in there as well. Preferably for the main event, or not the main event, the co-main events, the title fight at featherweight. And I feel like Holloway could build this whole storyline around himself, that he is the guy that jumps in on short notice. He is the guy that steps in and makes weight as a replacement. You saw that with Khabib not too long ago. He also did it recently with McGregor versus Poirier too. He said he was going to stay on the island and be ready to jump in if anything happens to the main event, skateboarding around in the background as other guys get ready to go on and have their own fight. I feel like Holloway has sort of built this character in himself to be the guy that sort of steps in if anything goes down, and I think he could be that at UFC 260, and I think it would just build to the storyline of Volkanovski versus Holloway too if he did go there and weigh in on short notice, because it would be like Holloway is chasing him down and giving him nowhere to go. I just think it would make great sense to get the headlines on Holloway again at 260, give him a bunch of interviews at the event as well, talking about what he thinks about the main event, what he thinks about Zabit versus Yair, which hopefully can be made on that card as well. I just think it would boost everything around the featherweight division to have Holloway tied to that 260 card, and he could also jump in on short notice against either one of those bouts if they fall apart. That's what I want to see Holloway do next, because I think if he waits for a title shot, he could get passed over if the wrong things happen in the featherweight division and things don't go his way, etc. Or if, for example, Ortega winning the featherweight world title, that would maybe give Holloway a chance to get the fight there. But if Volkanovski wins, it could go a bit wrong. But as for the rest of the featherweight division, I think Holloway should step in for both of the main, or the co-main of Volko versus Ortega, and also Magomed versus Rodriguez. However, for the rest of the division, below those top few, which is right now an absolute stackedness of the division right now, I feel like we just need to sort out the top 5. But outside of that, there's a whole other ecosystem of featherweights we got to figure out. So I think we should make the Korean Zombie versus Calvin Kattar in July. That's the one I want to see next. The Korean Zombie took a lot of damage against Brian Ortega. Calvin Kattar took a lot of damage against Max Holloway just a few months later. So I think we could make that in July or June, early July. I don't know what to do really. I know Kattar didn't get slept and neither did the Korean Zombie, but they took a lot of concussive damage. Let's match them two together. Early July, late June, whenever they want to do it. As soon as Calvin Kattar's brain scan comes back okay. Then I want to do also Josh Emmett versus Arnold Allen. Both guys have accepted to fight before at UFC Raleigh in January of 2020. That didn't end up happening. Arnold Allen has been on ice since then from guys pulling out of fights with him like Jeremy Stephens, which we'll talk about in a second as well. And also Josh Emmett pulled out of the fight as well with an injury, but then took on Shane Burgos afterwards, which he wasn't injured for, and then got injured against Shane Burgos, but he's back in training now. I want to see Josh Emmett versus Arnold Allen in April, and the Korean Zombie versus Calvin Kattar in July. Winners take on each other. That would be the perfect semi-finals of outside the top 5 in the featherweight division. But below that, we get to the other stage. This is the turnover stage, in my opinion, where you start to sacrifice some of your contenders to push other ones forward, and also sacrifice some of the older guys to get the newer guys in there as well. And we'll talk about that to begin with. Jeremy Stephens has been talking to Giga Chikadze this whole time. In fact, he pulled out of the Arnold Allen bout with an injury, and then Giga Chikadze called out Jeremy Stephens and not Arnold Allen. I don't think Arnold Allen's even that good, but people don't want to fight him for some bizarre reason. Jeremy Stephens also called out Giga Chikadze after pulling out of a... He also called out Giga Chikadze after pulling out with an injury against Arnold Allen. So I think that's the fight they're probably going to be making next. I think we need to jump Giga Chikadze straight into the rankings. He's got a ton of hype right now. Let's jump him straight up there against Jeremy Stephens. If Stephens loses, it's time for him to go home. But if Chikadze wins, we get an absolute reshuffle of the featherweight division, and a bunch of other contenders that are above Chikadze right now also get a natural jump up with Stephens not being in the mix anymore. I know it sucks to be Stephens, but when you lose that many in a row, you kind of have to be fed to the wolves a little bit. So I think we should do Stephens versus Chikadze in the co-main event of a fight night on March 20th, which is the Holland versus Chimaev card, I believe. I think that would be a good fight night for them to be on. Maybe not the co-main event, maybe the feature fight or something along these lines. I know Jamahal Hill is taking on Paul Craig in that event as well. But then again, down the division, Sadiq Youssef also needs an opponent. I think he should take on Edson Barboza. Both guys coming off wins. I feel like Barboza's earned a jump up. He shouldn't have to take on a guy below him again. I thought he beat Dan Ige, so he should really be ranked above Dan Ige right now. He also beat Makwan Amirkhani recently. I think they should do Sadiq Youssef versus Edson Barboza. A good matchup for both of them. A striker's dream matchup. Co-main event of a fight night, or even also on 260. Along with Volko, Ortega, we could have a whole featherweight showdown on that card, and we could do Sadiq Youssef versus Edson Barboza as the headliner of the prelims. I think that would be amazing. Moving on down the division as well, speak of the devil, Dan Ige versus Ryan Hall has been booked for March 13th. I think that's an amazing fight, and I think the winner of that one could be looking at the winner of Youssef versus Barboza, could even be looking at the winner of Stephens versus Chikadze. I think that would be a good matchup to make. You've also got Shane Burgos versus Hakeem Dawodu, was supposed to happen at UFC 257. I think that should be postponed now. Dawodu's got a shoulder injury, but he's still training fine on Instagram, so maybe it wasn't a bad one, and he can turn around quickly. Also, they didn't find a replacement for Burgos, which tells me they're probably going to reschedule it at a later point down the line, and I think they should put it on the headliner of the prelims of UFC 258, which needs a bunch of help right now with bringing some more fights on the prelims. Burgos versus Dawodu should be the 258 prelim headliner. The winner of that one should take on Bryce Mitchell in June once his hand heals up from being broken. That's the perfect matchup to make. And then we get to the other part of the division, just outside the rankings, and this is just an absolute slaughterhouse. No mercy whatsoever. Losers get cut, winners go on. We're going to have to figure out outside the rankings, and the winner of this whole little skirmish are going to get their positions at 14 and 15 in the rankings afterwards. I think we need to do Cub Swanson versus Movsar Evloev in May. Great matchup. I feel like Cub Swanson would take it as well. As much as Movsar Evloev has looked really good and has a really good resume and everyone used to fear him, that performance against Nick Lentz, although he won it very clearly and it shouldn't have been a split decision, was a very close one. And I think a guy like Cub Swanson kind of licks his lips at those sort of sightings of Nick Lentz beating you in the first round and probably thinks, you know what, I could take on this young guy. I could show him a few things. I think Cub Swanson versus Movsar Evloev should be in May. The winner of that one definitely deserves a ranking next to their name, if not already, because I believe Cub Swanson should be ranked above some other guys in that division right now at the 15 or 14 spot because he's so good and he's beat some good guys and made other fights look really close. I think Cub Swanson versus Movsar Evloev in May. Also do Andre Fili versus Makwan Amirkhani. Both guys coming off losses. I feel like the loser of that bout is probably going to get thrown to the wolves afterwards, or even cut in case of Makwan Amirkhani, because we've just seen them lose too many times and we kind of know that they're not going to get anywhere in their career, and they're getting a little bit old now as well, past their prime, so it's a bit of a weird situation. Philly versus Amirkhani, winner goes on. Swanson versus Evloev, of course. Also do Daniel Pineda versus Damon Jackson. Loser goes home. Herbert Burns versus Kron Gracie. Also a fun matchup to make. I think that'd be a good one. Two Brazilians, two grappling guys. Good matchup. Should make for a fun grappling fight in my opinion. Darren Elkins versus Ilya Topuria. I know it feels bad for Darren Elkins, but this is just a sport we're in. Darren Elkins is going to have to take the L for the division, in my opinion. Darren Elkins versus Ilya Topuria. Elkins is coming off a win right now, so it's the best time to get him, in my opinion, because he's got some value to his name. He's not just going to be seen as a guy who hasn't got it anymore. Is he over the hill if Topuria beats him? He just shown that he wasn't over the hill against his last opponent in Luis Eduardo Kokori. Had a great performance there and got the job done. I think now's the time to put Ilya Topuria against him. Also, I want to see Gavin Tucker versus Lerone Murphy as well in April. April for Elkins versus Topuria as well. Let's get the featherweight division match made up. I'm done fucking playing around right now. Every other division, the contenders are fighting each other. What's going on, Zabit and Yair? Let's get moving. Jesus. Featherweights, watch out. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching the video. Click that button up there. Goodbye. I'll see you later. Holloway needs to be the replacement for both of those bouts. And I don't know what happens if they still win accordingly and all the fights go ahead. At least Holloway gets in shape for featherweight, doesn't blow up too much in the off-season, still gets in shape and trains. He's still a young guy, gets paid in the meantime as well, and just builds the narrative moving forward for those potential fights for the belt and also against Emmett versus Yair. Just having that storyline of a guy make weight for a bout is big. We saw this with Michael Chandler. It adds a bunch of hype. They answer a bunch of questions of interviewers. They also get a bunch of spotlight at the time when you're watching the weigh-ins at 260. You see Holloway weigh in. It's a good little image for a promo down the line. I think it'd just be a good idea. Thank you for watching the video. Click that button up there. Goodbye. I'll see you later.